It's summertime and it's time to get wet with Resto Shaman and Dragonflight Alpha because the talents are live for all the Shaman specs, and of course we cannot tackle Shaman without checking the Resto Shaman, one of my, if not the personal favorite healer in the game. And let me tell you, it's looking pretty much as good as you can expect if you have seen any of the talent trees or watched any of our previous Shaman videos. Obviously elemental and enhancement, and you can see all of this and more played live on our stream, twitch.tv/Marcelian&Online, where you can check us play everything, pretty much everything that we can get our hands on. So you can go there, hit a follow, maybe even get a prime going and join the chat, and let's talk and see what Alpha in Dragonflight is all about. But with that out of the way, let's take a look at the talents that Restoration has. Again, I've kind of said this in previous videos, but on the off chance that you haven't looked at elemental or enhancement in any way, or if you don't plan to anyway, the general talent tree for Shaman is probably the best that they have ever done so far. There are a couple of throughput nodes that increase some damage and some healing and stuff like that that you might want to take, but pretty much everything else is up for grabs in terms of what kind of utility you want to have, what kind of reach you want to have in your party in terms of helping stuff, because obviously you have stuff like Mana Spring Totem, which is particularly good. It does proc from using Riptide and Lava Burst, so I am not sure. I mean, it's obviously good, right? You don't really want to spam Lava Bursts or Riptides in the hopes of getting value from it, because you're probably not, but it does help all your other healers. So likely Mana Spring is going to have a lot more value in raids. Then, you know, we can consider dungeons that you don't really have mana problems, since you go from pack to pack, you have time to drink. And that remains to be seen, especially how level 70 stats will scale and how much of a problem mana will be. But outside of that, you have a lot more. You have Stone Skin Totem, which is... I think this is way better than I think a lot of people might give it credit for, because it's 10% physical damage reduction, and that's a lot, especially for tanks, especially if your tank is pulling massive pulls in dungeons and it gets slapped by melees left and right. That's really good. Obviously, you have Windrush Totem, you have Earth Grasp Totem, you have Tranquil Air Totem, which I don't think anybody's gonna use instead of Soul Skin Totem, but I digress. Totemic Recall or Totemic Projection was it, that you move totems around, and of course Call of the Elements to reset cooldowns on totems so you can get more and more and more, because there are some pretty good totems, especially in the spec tree, which we can get to. But before we go into the spec tree, there's one particular talent that I do want to touch upon, and that's probably improved Lightning Bolt. I don't know if that's the name that they will go for still, but it does increase the lightning bolt damage that you do by a total of 20% if you put 2 points in. And that's relevant because it can end up doing more than Lava Burst, which is crazy considering that, you know, Lava Burst was pretty much the bread and butter of Restoration Shaman DPS. But you're not here to listen about DPS, are you? You're here to listen about healing. And we go into the Restoration Shaman healing tree. Now again, I have to preface this, I'm not a main Restoration, so I cannot really wrap my head around the complications of particularly going one side of the tree or another side of the tree, because obviously this has to factor in encounter design, has to factor in damage taken, has to factor group composition and stuff like that, and what kind of raid composition you will have and what healers you will be able to heal with together in a raid. Since in dungeons, I think it's likely that pretty much all of them will work to some extent. Obviously, the higher go in the Mythic Plus keys, which we will have access to eventually, the better, the more specific you have to get when it comes to the talents. But overall, it's still a Shaman spec tree, which is pretty well designed. It has a lot of crossovers. You can mix and match and go through all sorts of paths. And particularly what I would actually love to see come back, my personal favorite, which I've also tested, is the High Tide playstyle. That's a very big focus on chain heal. And there are a bunch of talents that you can pick in this build, even at level 60, without all the talents being available. You can pick a chain heal focused build, which is kind of cool. It's cool. I love chain heal. It's kind of the, you know, quintessential Restoration Shaman theme. And it's really nice. And of course, if we go into the chain heal, which is kind of towards the left-hand side of the tree, we cannot not talk about Acid Rain, which has people grabbed by the balls, because we all know that Acid Rain, aka the Torghast power for restoration that makes healing rain deal damage, has been, you know, the best thing that Restoration has had to do in terms of damage. Hold your horses, it doesn't do that much damage. It's okay, it's okay. The ticks are around, so it hits at most 6 targets, and every time that, you know, Healing Rain would normally heal, I would imagine the ticks of damage rock out as well. It's kind of like 1 tick per second. Obviously, it could be hasted. I'm not 100% sure if the ticks are hasted, but we will see. However, 1 tick of Healing Rain damage is almost as much as 1 tick of Flame Shock. Now, this is at level 60. Depends exactly how they scale at level 70. So it's particularly free damage. Now, in dungeons, this might become important in high fortified keys or in big pools or anything like that. In the dungeons that we have had the chance to test, things didn't really last that long and tanks move a lot to pick up more shit because shit dies quick. So I couldn't really get a massive feel of the overall value of Acid Rain, but it is there and it is kind of free damage that, especially in raids, you're probably going to want to have Healing Rain up all the time. And even though it's only 1 boss, plus minus whatever adds the encounter will have, it's still free damage that you can get. Alternatively, on the same note, there's a choice, which is, I think, Call of Thunder, increases Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning damage by 35%. And if you do look further down the tree, you'll also see Stormkeeper for Elemental. And now we get into some juicy bits, because with this build, I've also been able to do a bunch of damage. And the damage is pretty nuts, man. If you take the Lightning Bolt buffer from the general class tree that I've mentioned before, plus the Call of Thunder, plus Stormkeeper, Lightning Bolt will fucking truck for healer, which is nice. And this is nice because it's kind of constrained within a tight window. Sure, you can Lightning Bolt outside of Stormkeeper and you'll still do decent damage if you don't really need to heal, but you can actually burst, especially with Chain Lightning and Stormkeeper. You can actually burst and you can take Master of the Elements, which is also closer to the top, but a little bit to the right side of the tree, which makes Lava Burst increase the nature damage of your next damage spell. So you can kind of weave in Lava Burst and an empowered Stormkeeper, then Lava Burst again, and then another empowered Stormkeeper, Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning, depending if you're an AoE or single target. Then you have some decent amount of burst, which is kind of nice, because, you know, I know a lot of people don't particularly like to feel like they have to do damage as a healer, and this is a good choice in terms of, okay, your damage doesn't really influence your healing whatsoever, so if you do damage, you're not doing any healing, which is, I guess, the ideal situation. In an ideal world, I would like to see the DPS spells have cost a little bit more mana, but I mean, we go into like some pitchforky things because a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people have downtime if you play your spec right. That is the struggle of healers, because if you play your spec right and everybody plays their spec right, they're gonna take very little damage as opposed to, you know, trying out the encounter for the first time. So you won't really have anything to heal most of the time. So all you have left to do is damage, and having to do that with very expensive mana costing spells feels a little bit weird and a little bit annoying, but this is the nature of the healing. The balance of damage to HPS ratio to whatever the mana cost of the abilities are will probably always have to be tweaked. But that out of the way, you will see a bunch of familiar things. You can definitely see Primordial Wave with a couple of fillers that can buff it up. You'll definitely see Primal Tide Core, which is the legendary that you've played with in Season 1, at the very least in Shadowlands. That's when I played most of my restoration dungeons and raids, which is pretty cool. You can definitely go with a Riptide build. Then you have Deep-Rooted Totems as well, where that makes it, you know, when you pop Riptides out, you have a chance to get Ascendance, which is also really good. If you like the passive, consistent throughput, you obviously have Ascendance as well. And speaking of the right-hand side of the talent trees, where you do have deeply rooted totems, you have a couple of really cool things. Obviously, you have Wellspring and a lot of actual spells that you can get into, and a lot of talents that you already have. They're sprinkled all over the place. But one thing that caught my eye, my mind, both of them, whatever, is Earth Living Weapon, which is something that I haven't seen in so long. Now, I don't know exactly how good this will be on paper, because obviously numbers are subject to change, but the concept is awesome that we have it back again, and you actually can also improve it and make it a little bit more interesting, and that's kind of cool. There is a bug with Cloudburst Totem right now where you don't really get the 2 charges of Healing Stream Totem, because Healing Stream Totem in the Restoration tree, I think that's the one that doesn't work. So if you point into it, it doesn't give you a second charge. Cloudburst does replace Healing Stream Totem, but obviously you don't have 2 charges of Cloudburst, and the overall healing that it accumulates is a little bit less than we have on live. So, and I couldn't see it work. I've popped it, I've funneled a bunch of things, and once I popped Cloudburst Totem, I didn't have a button to reactivate it to pop the healing up. And once it expired, I couldn't notice any healing going on anybody. so I'm not sure if it fully functions. I couldn't really test to see if the 20% feels a little bit off. And to be fair, the most amount of healing that I would have done anyway would have been with empowered healing surges and stuff like that. So that's kind of probably still gonna be the thing. And if you go deeper down, yeah, you get an earth living weapon, and you can unlock wellspring as well, and a lot of other stuff that are pretty cool and that kind of work towards making Restoration kind of what you know so far. So there are a few newish things. But yeah, you will notice some conduits being placed there, some old legendaries, some old spells and things like that. Ascendance is closely towards the middle. And you do have all of the, you know, the all-known culprits, the Spirit Link Totem, which is kind of in the middle of the tree, which is great. And if you really look, and because we kind of cover most of them, obviously we're not going to go in depth over all of them, but if you really look at the tree, it's so webbed. It's maybe one of the best designed spec trees, if not the best designed spec trees, where pretty much everything outside of Water Shield is connected to anything that it can be connected to outside of actual pure horizontal connection. Which is great because that gives you more options to branch out, to take what you want. And even though things might be spread out a little bit, it doesn't really matter that much. And I think it's even better designed than Enhancement and Elemental in terms of its overall concept, where it can give you the most amount of freedom to build your restoration however way you want to. And couple that with the class talent tree, where you can get all sorts of utility totems and you can get 2 shields if you want to. There is a talent that I'm not sure if this mechanic was present in Shaman prior to Dragonflight, because I personally haven't played with it, but you can get Elemental Orbit, which lets you have 2 shields on you. Obviously, you're going to have Water Shield and potentially Earth Shield as well, so that, you know, especially when you're in raid or when you take passive damage, you get to heal. It's a little bit more sustained. It's kind of quality of life, and that's kind of cool. As well, obviously, if you're soloing content, you can have Water Shield or Earth Shield and Lightning Shield, I would imagine. If you're out there in the world soloing content, you deal damage, you get healed and stuff like that when you get attacked. So it's pretty nice. I think this is maybe the best spec in the game in terms of freedom of build. I really believe so, unless we're going to see new classes in the future. But as far as I can tell, if you do want to main Restoration Shaman in Dragonflight Alpha and you want to make your perfect Restoration Shaman the best you've ever wanted to be with whatever options we have currently, you can do that. It gives you the most amount of freedom, and that's a plus in my book. And I really hope that if any of the Blizzard devs are watching this, please take this mindset into other specs and other classes that have issues with talents and spread them out. Give them the freedom to choose and play the way they want to, because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't players want to play the way they want to? It's fine. I stutter sometimes, it's okay. I live with it, you live with it. But thank you for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it, and also make sure to not forget to check out twitch.tv/Marcelian&Online, where we stream pretty much everything that we're gonna put into videos on Dragonflight Alpha. The schedule for the streams will be in the channel page, so you can check all of that. Thank you, dear patrons, for supporting the content and making all of this possible. We couldn't be able to do daily videos without your support. Thank you very much. Patreon link down below if you, dear viewer, are also interested in supporting us a little bit more. Good, see you next time. We have so many more specs to cover.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.